Hi there. Coming up on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and from CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, we're talking about the pivot for vision and structure in teaching post-pandemic. We've got education leaders to talk about their pathway and what they're hoping to accomplish inside the state capitol.
Naj, the Legislative Lunch Break starts now.
On a Wednesday, welcome to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Edgar Zazueta, ACSA's Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing Communications. Welcome. Honored to have you back here on a Wednesday. Go ahead and jump into our chat. Say hello. Let us know where you're watching from today and what's happening in your district. Edgar, a week off, even though it really wasn't a week off for you and I, but good to see you. How are you?
No, every time you say that, Naj, I got to give you a hard time. You always say week off. You make it sound like we're just hanging out. You know,
I know.
It was a good week. I saw many of our folks. I was overwhelmed by the thank yous, by a little almost sometimes sheepish, embarrassed by folks that would come up and say that they join us each week. So yeah, it was a good time. We saw many of our members, not just last week. I think over the last couple of weeks at some of our ACSA events, Superintendents symposium, and we had a few events before that, so it was good to see folks in person.
It was great to see so many of our members. You are absolutely correct. We saw so many last week that talked about the show. So obviously, I'm happy to have so many people watching the show. In fact, we had a number of people who are already online in the comment section before the show even started. Maria Thompson, Michael Gallagher, Mike Hendricks, Susan Denton, Beth Bray. So good to see you guys here. Gary Reller's on with us, Dave Marshall, Shelton Yip. Clearly, Edgar, it seems like people missed us while we were gone.
I won't give ourselves that much credit, but it's good to be back in the swing of things. I think you went solo a few weeks ago, so I guess I should give you some thank you there, as I got caught up in some of the craziness that our world just throws at it. And I did catch, I have to point this out.
Yeah,
I did see you were the instigator, and members of my government relations team were very quick to pile on Edgar there. So it was noted there. I didn't miss that.
You know, what's funny is that they didn't hesitate to pile on with your inability to jump in on the broadcast. So, we'll take that as how it is. Hey, I just want to let you guys know, we'll hit a couple of news headlines, and then we've got members of the Santa Clara County Superintendents Association on the show today to talk about their push for some pivot, some structural change for what comes after the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll talk to them in just a couple of moments. Edgar, let's do a couple of news headlines. One thing that we have not addressed, because we were off last week and then you were traveling the week before, which is Dr. Pan, Senator Richard Pan's introduction of the bill that would supersede Governor Gavin Newsom's student COVID-19 vaccine mandate by eliminating the personal belief exemption and requiring all kids in kindergarten to 12th grade to get the shot, the COVID-19 vaccine, by January 1, 2023. Only students with rare medical exemptions could opt out. Obviously, Edgar, you and I were down at Soup Symposium last week, but what are you hearing, not just from the superintendents, but from principals, from other administrators about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, we expected this, right? We've been talking about it here on a weekly basis for months. We kind of knew this was going to happen. It was just about a matter of the formality of Dr. Pan actually formally introducing the bill. And so hence this becomes the start of the legislative process. I know sometimes it gets a little tricky out in the field, because I heard from a number of our members that their communities saw the headlines and said, oh, it's a requirement now. This is going to go into place, right? And so the good thing to remember right now, regardless of people's views on the bill, is that this is the start of a process, right? They're going to go through hearings. They're going to consider some of this. Obviously, there's going to be a ton of attention on this issue. I would go as far to say there may be no other issue, education or not, that gets more attention than this bill. And really, it's codifying the requirement for the COVID vaccine, but also probably the piece that's going to be the most controversial. It's proposing to do away with the personal belief exemption. So we've been talking a lot about this. We're going to talk a lot about this. I know you and I were joking here before that we're efforting Dr. Pan here. We're doing our best to get him online and have this conversation with some of you folks. So we will definitely have a lot to say on this bill and on this issue in the weeks and months to come.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And Edgar, I do want to point this out. This is from our good friends over at EdSource. They did this roundtable titled California School Principals Leading Staff and Students Through Uncertain Times. We know about 60, maybe a little bit more % of our membership here at ACSA is made up of principals, but they did a whole roundtable here. And it was enlightening, really, to just get some of the feedback from the principals about what the day-to-day is like and some of the challenges that they are facing, some of the social and emotional wellness challenges that they are dealing with, not just with students and staff, but also with theirs. It's great to be able to hear this. And obviously, this is something that we've heard of a lot about the burnout, about the stress. There was a statistic in there that was quoted, and I want to quote this here. According to this, the stakes are high. Recent research shows that 1 in 5 principals quit every year, and 4 of 5 say they experience frequent job stress. So those are clearly numbers that were impactful. And something, Edgar, I think that you would agree, this type of roundtable really beneficial, not just for those participating, but also, principals, members at large.
Oh yeah, I was super excited when EdSource told us that they had this in the works, and they do great work at EdSource in terms of their reporting and really trying to bring some voice to some of the issues that, frankly, we've heard from our members throughout the pandemic. And so I thought it was powerful. I thought it was powerful, part therapeutic in terms of our members, seeing that they're not alone and hearing some of those voices. But as you mentioned, Naj, I think to elevate some of these struggles, one could argue, and we represent a lot of members in different capacities here at ACSA, one could make a pretty strong argument that those site administrators may have had it the toughest of all of the different capacities, just because they got pulled in so many directions. And when there was shortages, when there was nobody to go in the classroom, they were in there. They were doing contact tracing. They're still trying to be instructional leaders. Some of the things that we're going to talk about with our guests. So yeah, principals have had a very difficult couple of years, and I was really excited that EdSource was giving some life and some perspective to that. So hopefully a lot of people tuned in. I think it's still available. Hopefully our policymaker friends were also watching and taking note of that.
Hey, I want to bring this up because you and I had the chance to meet her last week, and she is a viewer with us. And then I sat and had lunch with her. I believe it was on Thursday. Michelle Murphy, Superintendent, Rim of the World Unified School District, retiring. This is from the retirement ceremony at Superintendent Symposium last week. Michelle, again, a loyal viewer, one of our longest viewers here at the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. It was great to meet her. And again, I had the opportunity to sit with her at the retirement ceremony that took place at Super Symposium. Apparently, Edgar, this is an incredible venue to go watch a high school athletic event. Apparently the fog rolls right in and the weather conditions roll right in off the coast. So I'm thinking at some point you and I have to make our way to that school district to be able to see some of those athletic events. But again, you and I had the chance to speak with Michelle last week. Incredible woman, incredible district leader. Just honored to have her there, and just so many great things about our education leaders.
Yeah, it was one of the highlights of my week, just to be able to talk to Michelle and others, and just here, especially at that time, being able to recognize her retirement, as many of our folks are doing so. And she alluded to the fact that just trying to get through the last couple of years and the little tidbits that ACSA is able to give, whether it be the show or superintendents meetings or whatnot, and how that had been helping her. So yeah, that was definitely one of my highlights as well, meeting her and a lot of her colleagues.
I swear, if you and I decide to ever take this show on the road, we're going to have to find a way to do our show over there, perhaps during an athletic event. That would certainly make
We wouldn't complain, right?
wouldn't have to complain about our backgrounds here that you and I have. We could actually do one out in the elements. Hey, so we want to switch topics over here. There was a letter that went out from the Santa Clara County Superintendents Association last week to the state legislature and to Governor Newsom, talking about a pivot, an important pivot from pandemic to endemic, quote, to establish the vision and structure for teaching and learning in that new environment. Some recommendations. We want to see where this is headed. So let's go ahead and bring our two guests on right now. Roxane Fuentes is the superintendent from Berryessa Union School District and the Santa Clara County Superintendents Association. President Cheryl Jordan, Superintendent Milpitas Unified, and the Vice President for the Santa Clara County Superintendents Association. Roxane and Cheryl, it is an honor to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Roxane, let me start with you. Tell us a little bit about the Santa Clara County Superintendents Association. I know that you've all come together in the past on several issues. This one, obviously, very important. The latest is a call to the state to begin the discussion about pivoting from the pandemic. So give us a little bit of a background of how you guys came to put this together and where you're hoping to go from here.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Santa Clara County Supes Association, we comprise over 31 school districts in our county. We service 253,000 students, and we have the full gamut of types of school districts here in our county, anywhere from basic funded, community funded school districts to full Title I funded school districts and everything in between. So we have really extensive conversations about how we are best supporting our diverse communities. And as you mentioned, we have been advocates for lots of areas of need that we identify in our community regularly. And certainly with the pandemic, all the more we've relied on one another and the collaboration and problem solving as we face different issues. And I think, like all of our colleagues that have joined us today for this lunch break, you know, this past surge really has taken its toll in every school and in every school district. And it really got us, you know, as we were working through crisis, it really got us questioning, you know, our strategies and how we can continue to be more effective in servicing our communities in time of crisis and beyond, knowing that we are now going into our third year of dealing with this pandemic. What's the off ramp? Because there is a cost to teaching and learning, and we recognize that currently what we're being asked to do is not sustainable. And we wanted to be able to start thinking creatively and looking at all the resources in terms of advocacy for this critical conversation and not wait any longer. It needs to be had now.
Dr. Fuentes, Dr. Jordan, thank you for being here. And it looks like you guys brought in a good crowd, because I see a lot of shout outs to Santa Clara County.
Seriously,
you're representing there, so I always appreciate that.
It's like you guys did your own hype for the show or something.
I love it. I love it. Cheryl, so this might be a little bit of preaching to the choir, because all of our members are really facing this reality, this experience. Like Roxane said, how difficult the last number of months have been. But, you know, one of the things I appreciated in this letter, which I know we're going to get asked, we're going to share that with folks, so see kind of in writing what they had to say, but giving some light to how the role of whether you're a school leader or district leader has really changed over the course of this pandemic. So, you know, give us some perspective. How difficult has it been? What have you seen as those changes, and what's been the impact of all that?
Thank you, Edgar. In our letter, we wanted to do more than just express to our legislatures and to the governor that this is taxing everybody, because we know worldwide that COVID is an impact, and everybody has a personal story about how it's disrupted and changed their lives. So we wanted to give an illustration in numbers of what it looks like on the ground at the school sites, and also what happens with the district support team, even what happens with the learner as we go about with our COVID protocols. The most difficult protocol that we have to handle is the testing and the contact tracing. And those two pieces really should be in the realm of healthcare and county health providers. However, schools have become that stopgap. And so what that looks like is a principal who might have spent a day, even a week, taking time to be in the classrooms as an instructional leader, taking time to meet with parents about issues that concern their children, even being out on supervision to build connection with learners. That a great deal of that time is now dedicated to contact tracing, testing, follow-up, fielding calls, and trying to figure out what does the new protocol this week or this hour mean. One data point that we shared in our letter is that a principal spends about 60% of their time now, and in many cases more than that, just on testing and contact tracing. I've been at schools, I've assisted with some of the testing, and I've witnessed our students standing outside for up to 30 minutes at a time while they're waiting for testing or while they're waiting for results of the testing. I've spent time with parents over a weekend talking with them about the changes that are beginning to take place as a result of the surge. And this is really why, illustrative of why it's important for us to get ahead of the curve. We've spent almost from day one being reactionary in this pandemic. We haven't had an opportunity to be proactive. Now we're at a pivot point where we can finally be proactive, but we need our legislatures and we need our leaders in the community to work with us to spell out what that future is going to look like.
Yeah, you know what, Cheryl, I'm so happy that you said those two magic words right there, reactive and proactive, because those are two things that, incredibly impactful when we talk about how we've had to confront all of the challenges. We've been fairly reactive, but now this is that opportunity to be proactive. I want to remind our viewers of two things. One, we're going to put a link into the chat that has a link to that letter. Also, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them in our chat section. We'll go ahead and ask those questions as we move along here. Roxane, let me ask you, the call to the state made a number of recommendations. Give us an overview of what Santa Clara leaders are asking for right now. And of the requests made, do you have this belief that there are going to be some?
Yeah, that's just Naj and his bad internet. He has no excuse.
I was going to say, I missed that last part. That last part, but I'll go ahead and I heard the first part in terms of overview of what we're seeking. And certainly we tried to identify several targeted areas. First and foremost is in the healthcare support that we've all been providing to our communities. You know, there's been a lot of struggle as we've been trying to implement all of the different regulations and health directives that have come down throughout this past 2 years. And certainly as we try to pivot from change to change, we're looking for some consistency and guidance for K-12 school settings, between CDPH as well as Cal OSHA. That has been, an ongoing discussion here with ACSA, what are the different supports that are required to be provided for our staff versus our students. So looking for some consistency there so that we can best implement those safeguards. But as Cheryl mentioned, the key area that's really been taxing has been the over-reliance of testing capacity at the school site level. And, we're seeking everyone to take their full responsibility and obligation under these roles, whatever that parameter may be, from the public health department, but especially from our local healthcare providers. Certainly during this surge, what we saw was students, staff, families really struggling to get the tests that they needed in order to be back at work, be back at school. And the school site testing became the go-to. And that's where we realized like that cannot be a sustainable strategy. And we need to really think through what other resources can be pulled together for that. And you know, as you mentioned, Naj, earlier, there's definitely concern regarding burnout across our educator sector. Superintendents, principals, teachers, support staff, everybody has taken on additional responsibilities to meet the needs of their communities. And we certainly don't want to see good people go because they can't maintain the level of work that's being asked of them during this crisis period. And our expertise is in teaching and learning, yet healthcare expertise has landed in our laps. Our school principals are being asked daily for guidance on isolation and quarantine, and just how do I take care of my child? They have COVID. What do I do? Those are very common concerns that we get from our families. And, everyone's doing the best of their ability to address those needs. But really, we need our healthcare industry to be able to provide that direct service. So all of our teachers and principals and, district staff can get back to our level of expertise of educating, our students, especially in this time of need where our primary focus should be on accelerating learning. And with that, the additional ask that we have for the legislature is recognition that we have been operating in a crisis mode. And as a result of that, there are some other areas that need to be addressed that could help alleviate some of the stress that's happening on our systems right now. So we talk about some flexibility with all of the different plans that we're being required to do. We're asking for flexibility with the funding that we're being provided. The Expanded Learning Opportunities Program money, for example, we definitely have students who could benefit from that level of service, but we're all facing staffing shortages and time crunches. And so we're looking at, could that funding be extended? Could there be an extended planning period provided? So we don't miss that opportunity to provide key services that we know our students are in need of. And again, knowing that just looking at January and looking at the atrociousness of absences that we've dealt with students, we're asking, can there be some kind of reprieve with the chronic absenteeism as well as our funding, and how, this month of January and high absences is going to be addressed. But more than anything, we're looking for that opportunity to have our voices heard so that we can be a partner with the legislature to really think through what are the best solutions for our schools.
Roxane, that's well said. I mean, when you folks were talking about the plans, I don't know who coined this, but it was clever that the pandemic turned into a plandemic too, in terms of the state and all the requirements that they're putting on our folks. So I thought you folks did a nice job of outlining that. Cheryl, so one of the things that Roxane noted that the letter, and we might have lost Cheryl. If not, Roxane's going to hear it and she's going to jump in and she's going to answer the question. Roxane, you were noting the Expanded Learning Opportunity Program. Mm-hmm. I would also throw in something like Universal Transitional Kindergarten. I would note that these are big priorities. The state invested a lot of money, but yet we have this challenge that we haven't, like you noted, on staffing, on just what we're facing. What would you say to maybe some of the critics or folks in the legislature who thought that not only did they vote for this, but they thought we need to go on fast track and we need to push this forward now? There's some folks who may say like, hey, these things are good for kids, which I think at ACSA, and you noted, we'd agree. But what's the fine line? What do we say to those folks who want to just continue and say, no, we shouldn't move forward? Cheryl, I'll let you jump in there since you probably missed part of the question. I'll let Roxane start it and then you could offer some additional thoughts there.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, we're all in agreement that we fully support added resources for early learning, as well as additional extended learning time that the ELOP program will offer. But there is a reality that we have to acknowledge, which is the staffing shortages that are occurring, of facilities needs, space, all of those types of issues. No one's saying we don't want to support these initiatives. We do. We just need planning time. We need time to really think through how can we best implement these resources so that they're sustainable in the long run and that they can be thought through. And that's the ask, is the time. We appreciate the resources. And I know, Cheryl, you can also add more to those issues.
Yeah.
Cheryl, sorry that Naj's bad internet infected you there, but what would you add to what Roxane had to say?
Thank you. I would add that if we look at how organizations are able to do the best work, it doesn't require some planning. It also requires the ability to do planning that is based on a pivot and what used to be called making a tiny bet. And so if the legislators are unwilling to give us additional time for the planning, then what I would ask is that they give us more parameters for trying something and seeing how it works and then regrouping. So in the eye of a shortage of staff, then could we figure out how we might provide opportunity within the school day rather than having to make it a requirement of 3 additional hours outside of the school day? Is there something that we might be able to do on the weekends to make up for the required 3 additional hours per week? And we wouldn't know that if the legislature wouldn't expand the parameters. So my ask to the legislators would be, if you don't want to pull back the timeline on that, please at least expand the parameters so that way we can determine some other ways that we might meet the implementation of these programs in a way that is ingenious and that can occur if we're allowed the opportunity to fail forward.
You know what's funny? We used to, whenever we have technical issues, we used to be able to blame Wes Smith for them, whether it was audio or internet or anything like that. Edgar, I think we're going to have to find somebody new to blame.
I'm good with continuing to blame Wes Smith.
Oh,
so,
okay, all right.
Just stick with that
as long as you're good with that, and Cheryl, Roxane, if you guys are good, we'll just continue to blame Wes for it. Cheryl, let me ask you this, because this came in. Chris Norwood asks this question, and I'll expand on it. Chris asks, how can school district trustees support these asks of superintendents and district employees? I would say beyond just school district trustees, how can educators in general, those that are watching this show, those that will watch at a later time, just district-wide, how can educators support these particular asks? Cheryl, I'll start with you on that.
Okay, so school boards and superintendents have a unique relationship, and it's this opportunity where if we use a symbiotic approach, where we know that our school boards have perhaps a different ear of electeds, whether they be locally or statewide, it's sometimes partnering in a way that the board member can carry forth the water, so to speak, of what it is that the superintendents and staff see is the need. So a message coming from a board member may be received differently than from a superintendent, but the message is the same. So working together as a team. What is it that our collective educator community can do? What we're curious about and what we are strategizing on is how do we bridge that communication between the surge, and the endemic. So as educators together, if we take the proactive approach of, we know this is entering the endemic stage, we know that the onus of testing cannot remain in the classroom and in the schools. It needs to go back to the community. So if we together can make it okay for Public Health Department to step up alongside us. I know the California Public Health Department on question number 22 on their FAQs actually lends itself to supporting this. We need to make a communication effort so that parents understand that schools are not the only place for testing. There are community facilities. Parents now have the ability, when the supplies are there, to have testing in the home, to provide attestations if necessary for proof of negative testing. But this has to be a collective we. It can no longer be only the school is responsible for testing. It's all of us, and especially the health department. So messaging and communication are the two big areas that I see that we need support on.
Roxane, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just encourage everyone here on our lunch break to do similarly. You know, we're happy to share our letter because certainly, you know, Santa Clara County is one voice, but we have multiple counties represented here today. We know we have common experiences across the state and common sentiment regarding, you know, these issues. And so we ask you to join us.
All right, Roxane Fuentes, Superintendent, Berryessa Union School District. Cheryl Jordan, Superintendent, Milpitas Unified School District. To both of you, thank you so much for being with us today. An honor to have you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Hey, Edgar, let me bring up a couple of comments here. Let me go to them here. Mina Blasey had two comments here, actually. The first one, principals are exhausted from trying to maintain testing and contact tracing. How do we pivot to focus on the learning and move out of crisis mode? That kind of goes back to what Cheryl was saying about the reactive versus proactive. And then she also puts in, how do we offer expanded learning and create a plan when individuals aren't applying for the positions? Okay, so Mina brought up two different points there. Your thoughts?
I mean, those are great, and she probably meant them as like not necessarily rhetorical, because she's facing like, how do we actually do this, right? But I think those are the very questions that we're trying to pose to the state. That at some point we do need to start thinking about even for us, how do we get beyond just talking about COVID? How do we get to the core of what our system is supposed to entail and serve our students? And with some of the transitions, I think the Santa Clara superintendents did a nice job of articulating this point about some of these, I would say, these worthwhile initiatives from the state. And I think this is not a value judgment on some of the things that the state is trying to do. Giving expanded learning to kids, giving them access to more programs is truly important. Now, the question is, how do we do that when the system has limited capacity? And I think as our guest noted, that there's some options there in terms of flexibility, maybe an expanded on-ramp in terms of what the implementation thresholds are. So I think it's a really important conversation. I know you and I and our guests are going to have this conversation from a couple of different angles. Today, we were looking at it from the educator angle. I know we've been talking a lot about, there's a growing list of health experts that have been at the forefront of the pandemic that are also talking about what does our pivot look like. So I think that this is going to be a larger theme that we'll get into in the show, and then with some of our broader work here at ACSA.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you're exactly right. You and I, in the various conferences that we've been to over these last 3 weeks, just listening to the members, we've heard a lot about what comes next, to go out there and be proactive with our thinking and our structures of how we go out and support students and our school community. So definitely more discussion coming on that. Absolutely. Edgar, good seeing you today, man.
It's fun to get back in the mix. I know we have, we'll continue effort, Dr. Penn there. I know we have some other topics that we're looking forward to getting in front of our folks. So it's good to be back in the swing of things. Absolutely.
And folks, thank you so much for being with us here today on a Wednesday, for sharing your lunch break with us. We are back next week, 1 o'clock, here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube with a new edition of the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Have a great rest of the day and great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.